Oh my goodness. How's everyone doing? You sure? Crazy times. You were following the news last night. Crazy times. Um, and there's always a question of how do we get through these crazy times that we're living in? How do we get through, you could call it the last days, you could call it the technology age, you could call it just, I don't know, the 21st century. Um, and as unificationists, we believe that it is the end of history as we've known it throughout all of time, because there's these two people, Reverend Sun Myung Moon, Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon, true parents, two people that are called to expand the salvation that Jesus gave to the family and the world, and to finally create this kingdom of heaven that humanity's been looking for, maybe looking up above for, but has never been fully able to achieve. And so, first we gotta ask ourselves who these two people, what are they supposed to do? What are they supposed to model for all of us? How are they supposed to act? One way of describing it is, if you know the four great realms of heart, to be a model for children's love, love between brothers and sisters, love between husbands and wives, and love between parents and children. And that's something that we believe that Father and Mother Moon achieved. We believe that in 1960, Jew parents received a holy marriage blessing from God, unlocking God as a full heavenly parent. And the task for Jew parents then was to build a worldwide family. And that's what we as unificationists have been trying to do since 1960 and even before that. And with this task comes a lot of challenges. Can we all agree? Come on, there's challenges. We're challenged every day, because the thing that happens when these two people come is that there's a lot of things that are going on in humanity that are completely contrary to modeling these four realms of heart, these four types of relationships centered on a heavenly parent, centered on something higher than human beings. I was just discussing with a friend recently, we were talking about why the 20th century happened the way it did. Why were there two world wars? Why was there a third world war in the form of the Cold War? Why did millions and millions and millions of people die in such short amount of time? And one thing I came to was, well, in the 20th century, human became God. Human beings became gods. Hitler, Mao, Stalin, the list goes on. And as religious people, we identify them as antichrists or antitypes to true parents. Because true parents are meant to show us how we can embody God, so that we can be embodiments of God ourselves, so that God, the heavenly parent, can really experience all these types of relationships on the earth. But when we face challenges, or when we're seeking to model these two people, when we're seeking to model true parents, where do we start? Where do we start? And in Divine Principle, it talks about, well, we have our original mind that constantly guides us to this model, constantly guides us to God. And of course, we have a part of ourselves that tries to get us away from that. But the original mind isn't just a mind, it's heart. Shimjung, I believe it's called in Korean. The original mind, you could say, is also heart. It's the emotional impulse to seek joy through true love, to use a unification thought explanation for it. It's the emotional impulse to seek joy through love, and it's irrepressible, no matter how much you try. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. That is the human experience. That's the experience of God as a heavenly parent. Because when we view God as a heavenly parent, we're not just thinking that God just left us to fight with each other, left us to enslave each other, left us to commit sin against each other. No. God is also a being of love. And so that's one key. It's like, okay, when we're trying to model these four types of relationships, when we're trying to be true parents ourselves, we have to start with the heart. But the heart, or original mind, or whatever you want to call it, has three faculties. Does anyone remember what those are? Come on. Intellect? All right, give Andre Maas a round of applause. Intellect, emotion, and will. That's right. So, okay, so do we start with one of those? Or do we start with the heart? Not a simple question. Because you could say, oh, if I want to understand God, I should read a book. Like the Chunseongyang. If I want to understand true parents, I could read this book. Or I could go into Chunshimwan and feel the heart of God and feel the emotion of the music. Or I could have a conversation with someone and share my heart and we'll cry together, we'll laugh together. Or should I go out and be a missionary for my whole life, really serve others? Kind of that will faculty. Which one? It's not an easy question. You could do all three. People of all religious faiths do each at various degrees. But the unique aspect of True Parents' teachings is that they say start with the heart, because that was the starting point of God. It says in Unification Thought on the next page that with heart serving as the motive, God created human beings and all things as his object partners of love. So God started with heart, which means if True Parents have successfully modeled how to be an embodiment of God, and not just be an embodiment of God, but be an embodiment of God through these four types of relationships, they must have also started with heart. Can we agree? I think so. When I read Father Moon's words, and he's in Hungnam, or he's being tortured unjustly by the Japanese police, he always goes back to the heart of God. Like, without question. And even Mother Moon, when she was like 6 or 8 years old, she's a refugee. She sees the Han Bridge blow up behind her. She thinks of the heart of God. That's the instinct of these two people, is the heart of God. Go back to the heart of God, even in the most trying and difficult circumstances. Even if it feels like this dream of being embodiments of God that can model these four types of relationships is not happening. It doesn't exist around them. There's war. There's evil people all around them. And yet, they go back to the heart of God, because that was God's original starting point. So, okay, human beings. If we're struggling or we're trying to model, be the same as True Parents, be an embodiment of God like I keep saying and repeating, then we also should start with heart. How do we do that? Well, if God created us to be object partners of love, then our goal is to be object partners of love. That's our goal. And this is this kind of, in biblical terms, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5, be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Kind of emphasizing this point right here. Now, it's important to note, when we receive the heart, when we start at the heart, right? We start at the heart. So that means that we're trying to have a similar heart to God, a similar heart to True Parents. It doesn't mean we act the exact same way. In Unification Thought, it says the individual image, in other words, us, as human beings, which is the unique characteristic of an individual, does not exist independently of the universal image. So universal image is another thing, way of saying God, right? So human beings, our hearts, they can be unique. We can have unique hearts. We can have unique forms of our intellect, emotion, and will. But if they're disconnected from God, well, I mean, look at history. Look at the 20th century. The most disconnected from God, I would argue, humanity's ever been. Because the unique thing, actually, about polytheism and then later monotheism is that God was always, or the gods, or the deity, was always at the center of the society. It was always at the center of society. But I would argue, at around, you could argue, beginning of the Renaissance, but I would argue in the 19th century, that became extremely pronounced. It was very obvious that God was not at the center of most modern societies anymore. And so when we're disconnected from God, the heart of God, then our heart, humanity's heart, which is already disconnected from God, but if we disconnect even more at a worldwide level with societies and countries, well, you get human beings as God, like Hitler, Stalin, Mao, etc. Now, how do we then be an object partner to God? Because that's the way that we are able to emulate and receive the heart of God in our own unique way. Exposition of the Divine Principle says, joy arises, and when I first saw this about a few weeks ago, little backstory, I was writing another sermon for Belvedere, and then I saw this quote and I was like, like it was the most amazing thing for me. I ended up like not giving that sermon at all. I scrapped it. God was telling me like, yeah, no, don't say that. Don't say any of this. But God did save this quote for me, where it says, joy arises when we have an object partner in which our internal nature and external form are reflected and developed. Key words right here, reflected and developed. What's reflected and developed? Our internal nature and external form. So in other words, the core of humanity, heart, so our heart, amongst other things, is reflected back to God and developed. So in other words, God tries to form a relationship with humanity. He's giving us his heart, his whatever, and human beings, in order to emulate God's heart, need to, number one, reflect it back. Well, actually, even before that, we have to receive it. So, in a practical sense, that's listening to God through prayer, the Word, meditation, however, the Scripture, and then we have to reflect it back. How many people here think that they reflect the heart of God back at God? In other words, God gives you his heart and you basically give it back to him. You reflect it back like a mirror. Anyone do that? Yeah, I don't either. I'm going to put my hand down real quick. And then it has to develop that unique, you remember, individual image. It's not disconnected from God, but we still have a unique aspect of ourselves. We have to develop. Our heart has to develop. That's a tall task. Oh my goodness. That's such a tall task. I can't think of how many times I fall short of that. Now, why am I talking about all this? I'm setting the groundwork for answering the question of how do we act on heart, specifically the heart of God and the heart of true parents. Because essentially, that's what we're trying to do as a unificationist community who believe that there's some sort of providence, some sort of goal, some sort of direction, some sort of place that God is trying to lead humanity towards. So that's what God's trying to do. And so for us, this is so critical. It's so critical to address this question. How do we act on the heart of God, which is to see the completion of the providence, and the heart of true parents, which also is to complete this providence, this end of human history where we're not fully connected with God, and enter into a human history that actually is connected with God. And I was wrestling with this for a long time, and I still am. I don't fully understand, but I want to share what I know so far. All I know so far is to receive the heart by listening, and then to return the heart by acting on it. Now, I want to put this in a real, present perspective for all of us. So if you haven't been listening so far because it's sort of theological, I'm putting the groundwork in, wake up! Because this is True Mother's heart right here summed up in one quote, I believe. Her heart is, this is now the final step in the history of the providence. Okay, so right there, it's like, oh my gosh, like that's so daunting, isn't it? Isn't it daunting for some of us? I certainly think it's very daunting. And then she says, this is the last, she pauses, there can never again be a time like this. In other words, there's never a time where we can have the final step of the history of the providence be completed. Okay, and then she says, that is why in this moment, this place is so significant. The providence will be fulfilled. Because I am here, it will be brought to fruition. She's 81 years old. She's 81 years old. And she's saying this. She's saying, as long as I'm here, I will do my utmost best to bring the final step of the providence to completion. That's the heart right now. Like, there's no hiding it, there's no BSing it, there's no, just be your best self and be happy. It's like, I wish that were it. I really wish our lives would be so much easier. But the three great blessings, which we are all striving to fulfill, right? That kind of be happy for yourself, be happy for your family, be happy for the nation and the world, be happy with nature. It's like, that's all in the context of this, that this is somehow this final step in the providence. And I don't know why. I don't understand why. Maybe she's thinking about World War III, or climate change, or further disconnect from God and societies. That's probably the best way of looking at it. Because if you think the 20th century is bad, imagine the 21st century with a bunch of AI and technology and VR, where it's like, you can escape this world so quickly. Have you ever seen the movie WALL-E? How many people have seen the movie WALL-E? Okay, a few people. What are human beings like in WALL-E, Aki? Okay. Well, they're attached to something. They're detached from each other. They're literally, like, they're on a spaceship. They're all in these hoverpods. Completely fat. Their food is fed to them. Their toothbrush is moving for them. Everything is done for them. And they have no contact with the outside world, and they're like engaged in entertainment. That's WALL-E for you, and I really believe that's a prophecy for the future. If we continue to disconnect from God, if we continue going along this path, because there's all these conspiracies like, oh, the world is it's controlled by these elites, and like they're gonna, this is just modern day slavery and blah blah blah, and it's like, you don't have to believe in any of that to recognize that there's a significant possibility that humanity could be so glued to screens that they're disconnected from each other, disconnected from God, disconnected from spirituality, and who knows who's, maybe the people making this technology are controlling us. I don't know. I mean, that's WALL-E for you. That's WALL-E. But in WALL-E, what's very interesting is that it seems like humanity, in large part, went along with this. They weren't forced to do any of this. It took 2 conscious robots to convince a captain of a ship, as far as I remember, to land humanity on Earth and actually experience something beyond the artificial, beyond the fake, beyond anything that doesn't exist. That's, I feel, a real thing. Humanity, as a young person, I can say, I know in the future, if it got to that point where I had a choice, I would be very tempted to just say goodbye to heart, goodbye to intellect, emotion, and will, goodbye to God, goodbye to true parents, goodbye to goodness, goodbye to beauty, goodbye to truth, and just go in a hoverpod and feel stimulated for the rest of my life and then die. Because the world is hard. This is hard to even read, honestly. This is hard to read. It's hard to receive it. This is not easy, this first step. It's so hard that this is the final time, and True Mother's 81 years old, and who knows how long, she's gonna be alive. You see her, if you watch Peace TV, she's sometimes in a wheelchair. Her eyes aren't fully, she doesn't have a full sight. She has to wear sunglasses oftentimes because the light harms her eyes. It's like she's 81 years old. It's not like she has like 1,000 years left. We thought Father Moon would live till he was 100, and man, that guy's willpower was the strongest of anyone you could possibly ever see. He refused to die in prison with the craziest torture, and he even died before 100. It's like, this is serious heart, and it's hard heart. It's very hard. So, but we have to start with it. That's unificationism right there. Start at the most difficult point possible. It's like, oh, here's the most difficult thing. Let me purposely go there and then try and climb out of it. That was Father's mindset his whole life. Let me go to the most difficult place, sleep in the most difficult place, do the most difficult thing, climb out of it, and have the greatest connection to God we've ever seen, along with Mother Moon. Isn't that Father Moon's heart, those of you who met him or knew him or read about him? I really think so. And so that means we can't start on intellect, emotion, and will. And I'll tell you why. Let's start with intellect, which is something very, very prominent in our faith today. Oh, there's contradictions. Oh, like, I'm going to choose a side. I've talked about this before, right? I keep going back to it because it's so tempting to read this and be like, okay, what's the theology behind it? Okay, there's the 3 ages, and, there's the courses of Japan, and that means that this is the final era, and, but it's like, that doesn't, we understand so much truth in our community, and yet it's still very difficult to grasp this and to act on it. It's very difficult. Super difficult. Who likes witnessing? Maybe some of you do. I certainly don't, and I've read this book, I read the other Holy Scriptures, I read Exposition of Divine Principle, I read Mother's Word, I read, and yet I struggle so much with witnessing. I struggle so much with actually acting on this heart. And it's not just witnessing, it's you go down the line of things like Mother Moon's asking us to do. Address the climate. In Korea, it's like, decrease, stop the decrease in birth rate. That's a big thing going on there. There's countless, the Chumwongun, constant thing. And it's like, intellect doesn't, if I start there, I'm not going to be able to act on the heart. I tried that in high school. I, went to Epic, learned Divine Principle. And then senior year, when I got faced with a bunch of challenges, all the way down to the depths of, well, not hell, but let's just say the depths of struggle. That's where my faith went. Because I didn't have the heart. I was in high school, teenager, not really focused on the heart. That's understandable. But we got to start with the heart. And if we start with emotion, then we're going to think all kinds of things that might not be true. And the Chuncheonwan's an amazing place. It's amazing. But the beauty of Chuncheonwan is it's the garden of heavenly heart. It's not the garden of heavenly emotion. Not. So, it's if we start with emotion and we just go based on purely our feelings, well, I feel this, or I feel that, it's like we might lose ourselves. We might lose, the truth. We might lose the heart. Because emotion overwhelms the heart. If you know the Adam and Eve story, you know that very, 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 very well. And then with will, it's like you can act, you can start a million things that are like a million philanthropy things, you can start a million charities, but it's not addressing the root of the problem. So I was tempted to, I don't know. It's very tempting to be, how do I say it? The intellect, emotion, and will, if those 3 faculties are disconnected from the heart, then they don't serve the best purpose. It could serve a good purpose, I'll acknowledge that. But is it the best purpose? I don't think so. Because it's disconnected from the heart, which means it's harder to connect to God, which means then you're slowly making yourself and your emotion, intellect, and will God. You're going to slowly do that. At least that's what my study of history tells me, is that the more of natural human instincts, faculties, whether they're physical or spiritual, if they're not connected with original mind or original heart, which quickly gets you to a connection with God and your parents and all the rest, then you're going to become God, slowly but surely. Slowly but surely. I'll give you an example with Hitler. Hitler rose to power in Germany's ashes after World War I, where the whole world put all the blame on Germany, and then they had hyperinflation, hyper-economic depression, and the German people were angry. They wanted to, especially, they were angry at America, especially. If you study the history of cinema in Germany, you find there's a lot of anti-American animosity because they don't want their film industry. But it goes beyond that. And then who rose to power? Hitler, feeding off of what? Emotion. If you listen to his speeches, if you watch the propaganda films, it is genuinely emotionally charged. It gets you emotionally charged up. That's how Hitler was able to rally millions of people in the most organized crowds you ever saw. The same thing with Lenin when he started the Bolshevik Revolution. What were the Bolsheviks doing? They were not using their reason at all. They were killing anyone who owned farmland. How's that going? That's the silliest thing you could do. Kill and destroy all the farmland and the farmers? Are you kidding me? But Lenin was acting on emotion. Oh no, they own land, they're wealthy, they're oppressing us. We got to kill them violently. That's what emotion gets you. That's how they became gods. Lenin became a god, Stalin became a god, Hitler became a god, Mao became a god. because the intellect, emotion, and will, human biology, all of a human being, everything that makes us up as human beings is disconnected from heart. And yeah, it may seem like, oh, Luke's just, he's blabbering on a history lecture. This isn't our reality. We live in America. We have a democracy. We have the divine principle. We have true parents. We'll be fine. But it's like, no, we won't be fine. No, we won't. If we're not connected with heart, if I'm not connected with heart, I'm not just saying we, I'm saying me. I'm talking to myself. Something Father Moon said I was reading, which he was basically saying, like, if you're giving a message, you got to give it to yourself. And for me, it's like, gosh, if I'm not connected with heart, I'm doomed, I'm so doomed. For me, it's intellect. The intellect will just take over. And I'll think, oh, I know everything. No, I don't. I don't know anything. And when I am connected with heart, I realize that. That's me, personally. For the rest of you, it could be an intellect, it could be your emotion faculty, whatever you're strongest in, maybe something that you're weak in, maybe it's the will faculty. It could be anything. So we really got to start with heart, I feel. And the reason why this may sound kind of intense is because this heart is intense. It really is intense. And so, practically speaking, what does this look like for unificationist communities? What it looks like is we can't be bogged down by theological questions. We can't let our feelings or animosities with each other, whether it's, in a local community or between local communities or somehow nationally with leadership or whatever, we can't let those fester. We got to take care of them. We got to tackle them. And with will, in other words, what do? We have to do things that align with this heart. And that's hard, because that means we're going to have to unpack every wall that is blocking us to connect with heart. Whether it's, and this is very nuanced. You could say theological questions, like, what, is Luke saying don't focus on the questions? No, I'm not saying that at all. I think it's really important to wrestle with theological questions. But if we do that without a connection with heart, it's not going to work out too well, in my opinion. Heart, and thereby the ability to receive and then return and develop our heart. In other words, we receive the heart of God. We have to really take those questions, animosities, feelings, and ideas out of the way for a second. Just not forever, but for a second. And then we can reevaluate. Okay, these understandings, okay, the heart is guiding me towards them. Okay, my feelings, oh, I should work things out with this person or that person. Or, oh no, I shouldn't have a difficult conversation. I should just invest or whatever. We'll find out. We don't know. What should we do as a community? Okay, what program should we put on? Who should we invite? How many times should we outreach? What should we do? What should we do? It's like, okay, well, now that we're connected with heart, okay, I see more clearly what we can do, and there's no blocks. That happens with me with CARP. Sometimes I have some ideas for CARP, and then with the help of my team, I kind of take those ideas, I put them away for a second, connect to God through prayer, and then based on that, some of the ideas will stay, or I'll say like, hey team, yeah, we should really do this. Other ideas will be like, yeah, no, those were silly. Just like the sermon I was writing and then threw away because God was like, no, don't say any of that. So I hope this was able to, I guess, bring us closer to receiving heart of God and the heart of true parents, so that then we can act on it. And it is intense and it is difficult, but that's the beauty of a life of faith. The beauty of a life of faith is that you believe in the highest possible value. You believe in the highest possible standard, which to us is true parents. And then you keep struggling and climbing the ladder to get there. Even though it's not easy, even though there's a bunch of things you gotta shove out of the way and you have to resolve. But I feel as a community we can do it. I feel we can do it. And I think we can do it because true parents did it. And if true parents can do it, and we're people who actually know true parents, I think we have a high shot at doing it. Can we commit to at least trying to connect to the heart and then acting on it? Can we try? Yeah. Can we? Yeah. Okay. Please join me in prayer.